Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. What if Naruto joined the Gundam Wing universe? Naruto's unexpected family changes everything. Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Introduction. In the year 197, the latest war involving mobile suits had come to a close, the Barden Uprising had been thwarted, and the undertaking of the Family Reconstruction Act was well in hand. Most of the population of both Earth and the colonies were registered with a blood sample on file. There were 5 young men in particular who had a workstation dedicated to them in hopes of finding unknown family members. As stated, most of the population had registered. There were those who tried to avoid the now legally required doctor's appointment. One such example was Vernon Dursley of Little Whining, Surrey, England. This individual had supported the Alliance, and in turn Oz, and was decidedly bigoted towards anyone not like himself. However much Vernon tried to avoid registering with his family, Grunnings, the drill company he worked for, had already supplied all employee records to the section of government overseeing the FRA. And so it was after several notices ignored that a light-duty preventers agent was assigned to corral the family to the nearest FRA-approved clinic. The Dursleys grumbled and hem-hawed but ultimately complied. As was protocol, each family member was isolated from the others during the procedure. First, the dangerously obese man went into the exam room, then the contrastingly thin Petunia. Things became complicated when the rotund son, Dudley, let slip about his orphan cousin that stayed with them over summer as the cousin attended a distant boarding school. The clinic's doctor managed to get Dudley to talk quite extensively about Cousin Harry, and what she heard disturbed her. Dr. Martha Jones made a show of having to step outside of the exam room for the sample supplies. She subtly signaled the on-site preventer to join her in the office. Preventer Noah frowned as the doctor relayed what she had just found out about the supposedly household of 3. Preventer Noah radioed his partner, Nicole, who was canvassing the Dursleys' neighborhood. Nicole was in the cat-overrun house of a Mrs. Arabella Figg when the radio sounded and her partner conveyed a condensed version of what Dr. Jones said. Mrs. Figg the cat lady watched on in fascination, which Nicole thought odd. "Are you and the man talking about Harry Potter?" Arabella queried. "I babysit him from time to time. The boy is away at his boarding school, won't be back for a couple days yet. Young Harry is an orphan. Lost his parents at 15 months old, he did. Been living with his maternal aunt, Petunia, ever since. She and her family say such foul things about the boy, but not true own of 'em, I say. Harry's always behaved when I watch him." Of course, Arabella Figg hadn't registered with the FRA, so Nicole convinced the old woman to go with her to the clinic when the Dursleys returned. The rest of the day passed with little to note. Preventers Noah and Nicole submitted their report to their supervisor with a note of needing a follow-up visit for the 4th member of the Dursley household. A week later, agents Noah and Nicole returned to the Dursley house. Noah was to distract the family while Nicole located Harry. She found him in the back garden. As Nicole approached the boy, she frowned at the sight of him. The 12-year-old boy, almost 13, looked closer to 10, considering his size. Dirt-stained thin fingers, and horrendously oversized clothes adorned his thin frame as he weeded the flower patch. The neckline of worn tent of a shirt slipped to show a bony, scarred shoulder. Messy black hair, pale skin, and a pair of spectacles with bulky, round frames seemed to make his young face thinner still. "Hello," Nicole whispered. The boy startled then stared at her with wide green eyes. "I'm Nicole with Preventers. My partner and I are making sure everyone is registered with the Family Reconstruction Program. Would you happen to be Mrs. Dursley's nephew, Harry Potter? You weren't here when we took them to the registration clinic." The boy hesitated. "I am Harry. Aunt Petunia doesn't want me talking to people, though. You might want to leave before she notices you back here talking to me." Nicole gave a small chuckle. A trained preventer agent versus a housewife, oh dear. She smiled kindly at Harry. "Actually, the clinic's attending doctor pieced together that your relatives are not pleasant towards you. So, my partner is distracting the Dursleys, how about we get you registered, yeah? Dr. Martha is waiting in our vehicle." He boy nodded his consent. He clambered to his feet and dusted himself off as best he could. Nicole led him to the van marked Preventers parked at the other side of the street. They headed to the back doors, and Harry was surprised to see the portable, mini exam room tucked inside. Martha Jones was well aware of the limited time she would have with her patient. That she was operating from the back of a precentor's van only showed how determined she was to see to the boy's condition. By the sounds of it, the Dursleys hadn't been kind to him at all. One does not simply dangle a possible child abuse case in front of a Jones woman and expect nothing to come of it. Especially with Martha's younger sister working in child services. So while Noah distracted the family and Nicole collected the child, Dr. Jones prepped all the required paperwork and supplies. Of course, she intended to perform as complete of a checkup as possible from the back of a van. She had even brought a few things from home, a tape measure to check his height and a bathroom scale, for example. Her Polaroid camera was at the ready on the minuscule desk. One should never underestimate a Jones, she mused. We're like the Borg from Star Trek. Resistance is futile. It was as the doctor was snickering at the mental picture of her family as Borg, that the back doors opened. Martha grabbed the scale and tape measure as she hopped out. All right, then. With that, Harry's first real mundane checkup started, as unorthodox as it was. As efficiently as she worked, Martha still managed to entertain the boy with inane chatter about an American accented friend that apparently refused to die no matter what happened to him. Getting shot, electrocuted, car crash, falling from great heights, somehow the man just kept bouncing back. Soon enough the checkup was complete and the required samples taken. Dr. Jones smiled as brightly as she could and gave Harry a hug in farewell. Preventer Nicole escorted Harry back to the flower garden of number 4 Pivot Drive. Moments after the young boy resumed his weeding, the back door of the house opened. Vernon Dursley stood in the doorway a moment, silently observing his nephew maintain the flower plot. The man was still a bit red in the face from his discussion with Preventer Noah. Boy, Vernon shouted and took pleasure in seeing Harry jump in surprise. This man from the government is going to take you to a clinic for blood tests. Make you don't have any freakish diseases. The walrus of a man shuffled aside to let Noah step onto the patio. Hello, there, Noah greeted cordially. I'm Noah from the Preventor's office. Today I'm helping to make sure everyone is in compliance with the Family Reconstruction Act recently passed. Your relatives were processed last week, you see. They tell me you hadn't returned from school by then, so I'm back. Why don't you freshen up a bit, and we'll be off to the clinic, yeah? Harry glanced to his uncle for confirmation, and the big man snapped, hurry it up, boy. Don't go wasting the man's time. With that, Harry scurried to the hosepipe to rinse off the worst of the dirt before heading inside to wash with soap and change into a fresh set of clothes. Preventer Noah met him at the bottom of the stairs and led him out to the van where Nicole and Martha waited for them. The side door opened from within, and Martha grinned at them from the back seats, while Nicole patiently sat in the driver's seat. Since all of the clinic work was already performed in the very back of the van, the four merely went to lunch instead. After the meal, they dropped off Dr. Martha and her medical things at the clinic. Then the Preventor's agents regretfully returned Harry to the Dursleys. Noah and Nicole walked with him to the house, and both made sure to speak loudly enough for the obviously eavesdropping neighbors that Harry behaved perfectly at the clinic while registering for the fraud database. Nicole even went so far as to say that it was a shame that Harry was not taught about the rest of his extended family and especially about his deceased parents. Noah added on that the Preventor's database listed Lily and James Potter as members of a vigilantes group that opposed a vicious terrorist group that had a notoriously high death toll considering the relatively small area targeted. Petunia simply stood on the stoop with a strained smile, knowing that information would reach the entire neighborhood soon enough. With heavy hearts, the pair of agents left Privet Drive. They could only hope that the Dursleys wouldn't be too hard on Harry. In the short few hours that they had known him, that underweight child had already grown on them. Line break. Dr. Sally Poe busied herself between 3 monitors displaying results from the FRA blood samples. Her caramel-colored braids bounced as she took in the irregularities in each sample's file. For example, a boy in Britain had an apparently rare venom and anti-venom from an unknown species of snake. Another case had a strange virus that Poe had never even seen before. A 4th monitor acted separately from the other 3. This monitor and its processing system appeared to be searching for familial matches for 7 people in particular. The 5 Gundam pilots and the Peacecraft siblings, to be specific. DNA results already shown that Relina and Miliardo were only half-siblings, so the royalty-born pair were added to her special care list. Another thing Sally had taken notice of in the oddity files was that an increasing number of samples had unfamiliar antibodies. The venom anti-venom boy and the strange virus child also had the newly noted antibodies. In fact, There had been enough occurrences of the antibodies to warrant a new file tag, which Sally already programmed. Sally Poe completed her notes on the files on the 3 monitors and submitted the saved data to be added to the complete registry. The next 3 oddity files populated on the monitors, and the process started again. Meanwhile, Preventers Director Lady Une sat in a meeting with the hidden leaders of Earth. The hidden leaders were the ministers of magic of their respective countries and the representatives of the International Confederation of Wizards Witches. Lady Une had taken migraine medication before the meeting as a preemptive measure, and it appeared to help. Most of the magical people opposed the implementing of the Family Reconstruction Act on their citizens. One might assume that the gathered witches and wizards didn't understand what the point of the FRA actually was. It was with such a notion in mind, Une drew their attention to the projection screen. Displayed was a preventer agent that had previously thought himself to be the last of his family. Lloyd Renfield from the United Kingdom was a survivor of a terrorist attack 11 years ago. The remains of his mother and sister proved their deaths, but his father was assumed dead as many bodies in that area were horribly disfigured. The screen changes to what some of the magical folks recognized as the street Sirius Black supposedly blew up to kill Peter Pettigrew. Leod went on to be raised in foster care. It is thanks to the FRA's efforts that we located Leod's father and found that Theodore Renfield had thought his entire family lost to the exploding gas line. Leod now spends his downtime getting to know his stepmother and half-siblings. A new photo from the projector showed one Ted Tonks, a Muggle-born wizard that the grandfatherly Albus Dumbledore recognized. This is Ted Tonks, also of the UK. We discovered he has a half-sister and a number of nieces and nephews in the colonies. As I understand it, they continue to exchange correspondence. The image changed to a young woman apparently mourning. Since the FRA database includes the medical files of the Alliance and OZ, we have been able to inform waiting families as to the fates of their relatives. Shown here is Margaret Danvers. It is currently believed that her uncle, Oz serviceman Henry Danvers, died protecting the Winner family heir, Catra Reberba Winner, from a misprogrammed mobile doll. Mr. Winner has expressed his gratitude to Ms. Danvers, as she was Henry's next of kin, and had initiated a trust fund for her children. A photo depicting an elderly woman clutching a stuffed animal soon occupied the screen. Nadreen Elhurst recently recovered from leukemia. The FRA had found her estranged son, and he donated bone marrow to help fight the disease. Andrews now has a chance to see her grandchildren grow up. The next image displayed an orphanage's occupants. Children ranging from toddlers to teenagers, and all ages between, stared at the camera with hopelessness shining in their eyes. You have heard the success stories, the positive outcomes. This is the heart of why the Family Reconstruction Act was established. The recent wars, both mundane and magical, have left countless children without any known relatives. We aim to reunite families so that these children have a better future. The FRA is a mission of compassion. In this photo, ladies and gentlemen, are children of magic. Each has shown signs of accidental magic and been placed together until we can find their families, or at least foster families. That one there, Albus Dumbledore pointed to an older teen with long brown hair hanging in a thick braid over his shoulder. Who is that? He quite resembles one of my former students. A wry grin curled Une's lipstick mouth. That is Preventer Maxwell. He was either orphaned or abandoned on Colony L2 before he even knew his given name. His current name is one he gave himself. Having grown up with bursts of accidental magic on the streets, he often checks in with this orphanage and others like it. From there, the magical leaders and their advisors put their heads together to discuss the information provided. One of the top supporters for the FRA was, of course, Albus Dumbledore. He was marginally opposed by the British Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge, who was thinking of Lucius Malfoy's continued, support. With a majority vote of the ministers and unanimous vote of the ICW, the gathered magical leadership decided to embrace the Family Reconstruction Act. Line break. While most of the magical communities were fairly aware of the world events in recent years, the United Kingdom's magical population, by contrast, grew more removed from the happenings of the mundane world. Of course, there were exceptions, but those were few and far between. Ted Tonks, for example, tried to keep abreast of the world he was born into. When the FRA came about, Ted convinced his family to register. 2 months later, he received a letter informing him of a half-sister who lived in the space colonies. Ted had hurried to the nearest international communication center and made a video call to the contact number listed in the letter. The call was crazy expensive but worth it as he not only spoke to the younger woman but got to see her as well. As it turned out, Ted's father has fallen ill towards the end of his Hogwarts years. The man recovered, but Ted's mum was killed in a Muggle bank robbery a few years later. Tonks Sr. had mourned but ultimately remarried without informing Ted. Another magical citizen that followed the outside world was werewolf Remus Lupin. Considering jobs were hard to come by for werewolves in the wizarding world, Remus often found work in the Muggle world. At one point, he had found a job that honored his request to have a few days off around the full moon, citing religious reasons, but once he discovered the factory was making supplies for the Alliance, he quit. With a 2-week notice. No point in blemishing his work history, he figured. When the Gundams started attacking military bases, Remus paid more attention to the news coverage. He stood in shock as Sandrock was destroyed to allow the other suits, and its pilot to escape. He unknowingly wept alongside Duo and Troa as the Death Scythe Gundam was destroyed on live television. The world mourned the loss of Wei's CEO and praised the man for his bravery. Similar praise and sorrow for the destruction of L5. So many lives lost, and the werewolf grew frustrated with how little wizards and witches cared. When the Family Reconstruction Act came about, Remus considered registering, but the fear of his furry little problem outweighed his desire to reconnect with family. Kingsley Shacklebolt was also aware of the war with the Gundams due to his job as an Auror. Kingsley was acting as a bodyguard to the mundane British Prime Minister, after all. The concerns shown by the Muggle minister was, quite frankly, refreshing after dealing with fudges. It doesn't affect us, so don't worry about it, spiel. If the Alliance managed to destroy a Gundam over London, it would damn well affect the wizarding world. Another magical citizen to watch the happenings of the non-magical side was none other than Alistair, Mad Eye, Moody. Of course, the retired Auror deemed the Gundam pilots worthy of his assistance. A tracking spell, disillusionment charms, apparition, and his magical, Mad Eye, the grizzled man would use every tactic to locate the pilots' safe houses and leave a trunk with various survival necessities. Canned food, jerky, bottled water, some basic hygiene products, they were teenage boys, after all, and warm blankets filled the trunks. Safe houses aside, Alistair would creep while under either an invisibility cloak or disillusionment charm onto a base under attack and startle everyone on the base's radio frequency by shouting his customary, constant vigilance, amplified by sonorous, into the microphone. And then, still under his cloak and charms, he'd stun whoever he met along his escape path. Moody managed to attend some of Relena Dorley and Peacecraft's public political appearances, only to stun and bind would-be assassins. The retired Auror voluntarily registered in the FRA, using a random phone number in his mundane post office box for contact information. No word yet regarding any previously unknown relatives. Line break. Dr. Sally Poe was in the oddity file lab when the fourth computer beeped an alert. Sally startled but exchanged her current clipboard for S-1 to take notes on. According to the monitor dedicated to a certain 7 people, a partial match had been found. What brought a disbelieving smile to the doctor's face was that, apparently, Gundam pilot Hiro Yui had a half-brother on the paternal side. According to the half-brother's file, they were born roughly 3 years apart, Hiro being 16-ish and the boy nearly 13. Sally frowned, however, when she read the special note on the younger boy's file. According to Dr. Martha Jones, who registered him, Harry Potter was small for his age, showing obvious signs of malnourishment, neglect, and abuse. Dr. Jones advised that Harry would likely need relocating should any additional family be found, as his maternal aunt and her family treated the child poorly. Also of note, Harry was one of the oddity files, having the venom, anti-venom in his bloodstream. With all notable details jotted down, she called her superior to report in. Sally bounced on the balls of her feet, her braids thumped against her shoulders. Lady Yoon answered the direct line in just 2 rings. Before the director of preventers could greet the doctor, Sally blurted, "One of the boys has a partial paternal half-brother." Yoon gasped minutely. "Which one, Sally?" A large grin stretched across Dr. Poe's face. "The perfect soldier, Hiro Yui. Who'd have thought we'd get a hit on him before the others? Well, he is 01, after all. Perhaps Duo will be next," the bespectacled woman joked. "Send me the report, and I'll inform Hiro." Anne. "Wow, I am floored by the response this FIC has received. Haha, I bet it had something to do with Mad Eye Moody startling the Oz bases as mentioned last chapter. Anyway, I hope this installment is satisfactory. Thank you. Oh, right, disclaimer. I forgot it last chapter. Basically, I don't own the characters used in the story and make no financial profit from the story. Unexpected Family, Part 2. The Weasley family were enjoying their trip to Egypt. Part of what made the vacation so pleasant was that the eldest of the Weasley brood was stationed there. Bill Weasley worked as a curse breaker for Gringotts, the goblin-run bank. He was more than qualified to lead his family on a tour of the pyramids and the tombs within. At one point, a reporter from the Daily Prophet arrived to take a photo of the family. True to their nature, twins Fred and George had wrangled their oldest brother into the photo. Bill couldn't help but think it just a little odd that Ron's pet rat, Scabbers, posed on the boy's shoulder. The creature's strange behavior was shrugged off, and the photo was taken. The photo appeared surrounded by its accompanying article in the Daily Prophet. Of course, it was developed using magical means, so the twins occasionally tussled with their siblings. Ginny curled her hair around her finger, Molly chastised the rough-housing children, and Arthur appeased his fussy wife. And Scabbers scurried from one of Ron's shoulders to the other. Some time after the article and photo were published, Britain's Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge, visited the wizarding prison, Azkaban. His stroll became more of a strut as he entered the section for captured Death Eaters. It had become a favored pastime for Fudge to read off bits of the newspaper in an attempt to taunt the inmates. After a couple of paragraphs of an article, Cornelius would ask one of the prisoners their opinion or try to guess what happened next. Once the plump man tired of teasing with information of the outside world, he'd usually toss the paper into a random cell. On this day, the vacation photo of the Weasleys caught the eye of one Sirius Black. The gaunt man locked his piercing gaze on the small creature scurrying across a boy's shoulders. The suspicious creature seemed to scamper as if it could feel his stare through the photograph. Intuition and instinct commanded Sirius to investigate further. He politely requested the paper from Fudge, and the minister rewarded his good manners by slipping the wrinkled paper through the bars. The smug wizard's departure went unnoticed as Sirius studied the photo. Pale blue eyes seemed to glow from the ever-present shadows of the cell. A rat missing a toe on its front foot. "I've found you, traitor," and then a particularly disturbing laugh echoed down the holding block. Line break. While most of the wizarding world was adopting policies to register their citizens according to the FRA, the United Kingdom's Ministry of Magic tried to indefinitely postpone enacting the new protocol. Mostly, the pureblood families were pressing, bribing Minister Fudge to avoid the FRA. Dumbledore, however, was dutifully reminding the younger wizard, and in a booming voice so whoever happened to be near heard him. Of course, when the headmaster did this, ministry workers would inquire what he was talking about. Despite Fudge, Albus brought up the FRA in an open Wizenmont session. The minister sputtered in indignation, but the voting body raptly listened to their head Wugmump. The session's audience murmured a bit about this new idea. The headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry also brought the Family Reconstruction Act to the attention of his staff. Here, he received affirmative responses right away. Professor Phileas Flitwick did pose the question of how the Muggle test would account for hybrids, such as himself and Rubeus Hagrid, to which Albus readily admitted that he had not thought of it and was quite eager to know for himself. The fully human staff inquired where the registration would take place. Dumbledore replied that he would have the answer before the next faculty meeting. Professor Dumbledore's odd way of spreading the word of the FRA was surprisingly effective. Already many shops along Diagon Alley and the branching alleys had informed their workers. The Owl Post Office found themselves needing to rent additional Muggle post boxes to handle the sheer number of people needing a mundane address on the registration paperwork. The shop owners of Hogsmeade inquired if perhaps a registration clinic could open in the small town. Minister Fudge was soon bombarded with questions of the FRA protocol and regulations. Line break. Lady Une sat across her desk from one of Preventor's most effective agents. The agent sat unnaturally still as his boss's statement sunk in. He, Hiro Yui, somehow had a younger half-brother. He ignored the slight tremble of his hand as he reached for the file Sally Poe had collected. Dark blue eyes pursued the data hungrily, and a crease formed between his wild eyebrows as he regarded the attending doctor's report and the attached report from the overseeing Preventors. "So," Lady Une prompted. "Do you want to meet him?" Astute blue eyes peered at her through the mess of untamable hair. "Affirmative. And I will make my own assessment of his well-being. If his maternal relatives treat him as poorly as Noelle and Nicole suspect, a change of custody may be in order." The director nodded and steepled her fingers in front of her chin. "Also, Agent Wing, the use of his code name intentional, the United Kingdom's populace, the hidden communities, are much slower than the other magical ministries to register. While you are getting to know Harry, please impress the seriousness of the FRA onto Minister Cornelius Fudge. At Hero's raised eyebrow, Oon chuckled. Perhaps like the confection, he'll melt a bit under the correct kind of heat. She smiled at his eye roll. I want you to help get the magical citizens registered. You have authority to mobilize a medical tech team if you deem it necessary, but you would have to head security if you do. Hero Yui, pilot of Gundam Wing, met Oon's hazel-eyed gaze. Mission accepted. Line break. 2 days after his meeting with Lady Oon, Hero stood beside Ted Tonks on a London street. Thank you for escorting me to the UK's Ministry of Magic, Mr. Tonks. The wizard gave a pleasant laugh. Not a problem, Agent. I was going to drop by my daughter's desk anyway. She's an Auror, like a magical equivalent to a police officer, and her department's offices are within the ministry. So it's no trouble at all. They walked nearly half a block before Ted spoke again. Any ideas on what you'll say to convince Fudge to comply with the Family Reconstruction Act? If he's held out this long, I suppose you must have quite the argument on the way. Hero shrugged. I have several lines of discussion available. I will adapt to whichever meets the situation, depending on what the minister says. Ted nodded, and the pair continued to the guest entrance, which was disguised as a telephone booth. The wizard received a badge that read, Pestering Family, while Hero's badge read, Preventer's Business. The next major hurdle was the wand check desk. As the teenager didn't have a wand, he checked in his sidearm Beretta instead, much to the clerk's confusion. The preventer warily eyed the flying paper airplane memos in the lift, but he ignored them like everyone else otherwise. Ted pulled the young agent along to the Auror's offices and rapped his knuckles on the door with the nameplate, Amelia Bones. At the call of, Enter, Mr. Tonks opened the door, and the two men went in. The wizard explained the situation to the head of magical law enforcement, introducing Hero in the process. Amelia decided that she could use a break from her paperwork and that a show of support would likely further the preventer's case. The newly formed trio soon became a quartet as Nifedora Tonks, Ted's daughter, joined them. Back to the lifts and the swarm of folded memos overhead. As luck would have it, Author Weasley of misuse of Muggle artifacts stepped into their lift. The redhead noticed Hero's visitor badge and curiously questioned him about the organization. Then came questions on the mechanics of a pistol, the purpose of a rubber ducky, and how electricity worked. If anyone who had known Hero Yui for more than a day were to see this, no doubt that person would be surprised at the former Gundam pilot's show of patience. Arthur was so caught up in his questions that he didn't notice that he had followed the group to the minister's office. The group of 5 came to a halt at the pervasive hem of Undersecretary Dolores Umbridge. Do you have an appointment? The minister is a very busy wizard, after all, the woman simpered. Hero snorted at the sight of the witch. I've heard of fairy tales where a prince is turned into a frog. That spell must be gender specific. The unpleasant looks his companions were shooting at the toad-like witch broke at the teen's comment. The DMLE head tried to stifle her reaction, but Arthur and both Tonks couldn't help the at least smirking if not snickering. Amelia took advantage of Umbridge's outraged sputtering to usher the group into Fudge's opulent office. Once the door shut between them and Dolores, Arthur, Ted, Nymphadora, and Amelia broke into various levels of laughter while Fudge himself seemed confused. The younger Tonks clapped a hand onto Hero's shoulder. I like you already. Now, what is the meaning of this? Cornelius Fudge pounded a pudgy fist on his desk. Madame Bones took the lead. Minister, I have been made aware of a new international law that has yet to be implemented. The minister took in Hero dressed in his full preventer's uniform. Then his pale blue eyes scanned the assembled witches and wizards before him. Yes. Well, details to be arranged, madam. Lots of odds and ends to be seen too. Other countries with larger magical populations have had no problems, Hero replied. And so at least an hour was spent with Minister Fudge hem-hawing with excuse after excuse, and the others countering every attempt to dismiss the issue. At nearly an hour and a quarter, the flow activated, and Lucius Malfoy stepped into the room. Minister, the blonde nearly purred, you were late to our luncheon, so I came to fetch you myself. Ah, I see you have company. Hero grunted, then shook his head in contempt. He reached into the inner pocket of his preventer jacket to retrieve 2 envelopes. The agent slapped one envelope to Fudge's hand and the other to Malfoy's arm. The names of the wizards appeared on their respective envelopes. You have officially been summoned to register in accordance to the Family Reconstruction Act. You have 5 days to present yourselves and your families to the address listed within, or else preventer agents will be dispatched to escort you. With that, Hiro turned around and left the office. The others followed him without a word. Once they were in the lifts, Arthur snickered. Then Ted chuckled, and Nymphadora giggled. Madame Bones smirked. Hiro merely crossed his arms. Line break. Somewhere, in an Earth Station preventer's office, a parchment filled in with names and addresses. Recently added via magic was Cornelius Fudge. Swiftly following that name was Lucius Malfoy, with the names Narcissa and Draco branching off. Soon the name and address of Dolores Umbridge joined the list as Fudge passed the envelope to his undersecretary. Preventer agent in which Juliana Romandi typed the newly appeared information into her computer, adding the data into the database. Line break. The residents of Privet Drive, Surrey, noted a nondescript rental car driving up and down the street. What they were unaware of was that the driver was cursing the nearly identical houses, as they were throwing off his sense of direction. At last the dark blue sedan pulled to a stop next to number 4's driveway, and the driver climbed from the car. Number 5's housewife peered over the fence to see the young Chinese man in a preventer's uniform knock on the Dursleys' door. He waited a moment then knocked again. The housewife cleared her throat. "They're not here, dear. The Dursleys left about 2 hours ago." Chong Wufei turned his dark eyes gaze to the neighbor. "I see, thank you. Do you, by chance, know if they took their nephew, Harry, with them?" "Oh my." The middle-aged woman simpered. "Is that boy in trouble?" Petunia did say that he goes to a boarding school for incurably criminal boys. Wu Fei raised a disbelieving eyebrow. "I can't say I've ever heard of such a school. But no, Harry Potter is not in trouble with the preventers. I'm here because the Family Reconstruction Act registration database found a familial match on his father's side of the family." The woman gave a bright, fake smile. "That's lovely news. Petunia and Vernon are always talking about how that boy is a nuisance. Perhaps this new relative will take him." Hands fisted behind his back, Chong tried again, more directly this time. "Did the Dursley family take Harry with them?" They may have left him with Mrs. Fig. She's a bit batty, Mrs. Fig. Collects cats like some people collect stamps." With a stiff bow, the young man returned to his car and headed to the cat lady's house. Again, he had to circle the block to verify the address. Wu Fei parked next to the driveway and cautiously approached the door. A quick knock on the door was met by the yowling of what he could only assume to be guard cats. He happened to glance down and noted a calico paw swiping at him from the letter flap. The scuffling sound of house slippers barely raised while walking slowly got closer. An old woman grumbling about cats underfoot could be heard through the barrier. Soon enough, locks turned over and the hunched elderly woman cracked open the door. Despite mentally preparing himself for the smell of too many cats in far too enclosed of a space, the smell still winded the former pilot. Wu Fei coughed into his fist, hoping to clear his throat. "Hello. I am Chong Wu Fei with the preventers." The little old woman interrupted. "I have already gone to the clinic to get registered for that Reconstruction Act." "Oh, did you all find someone related to me? That would be exciting." "Well, this is awkward," Wu Fei thought. "Mrs. Fig," he continued at her confirming nod. "To my knowledge, we have not yet found a match in your file. There is still roughly 30% of Earth's population to register, so don't lose hope. Actually, we have a familial match on a boy named Harry Potter. His neighbor said he might be with you." Mrs. Fig gasped in surprise. "Mr. Chong, please tell me. Is the match to a living person or deceased?" "Little Harry was orphaned at 15 months old, you see." The preventer found himself smiling at the woman's concern. "The match is to a living person, ma'am. In fact, I know this individual personally." Arabella Fig nodded to herself. She'd been telling Dumbledore for ages just how cruel the Dursleys were to Harry. Maybe now he'll have elsewhere to go. "All right, Mr. Chong. Harry is inside. Why don't you come in, and I'll put on the tea." And so Wu Fei entered the cat's den. He soon found that his years of martial arts training helped him be mindful of where he stepped amongst the various furred creatures. The agent was led to a quaint sitting room. Dark eyes could barely discern the shape of a boy slumped across the loveseat, what with all the cats that made themselves comfortable on him. "Those awful Dursleys work him to the bone. Poor dear is exhausted, so I'll wait to wake him until the tea is ready." With that, Mrs. Fig bustled into the kitchen. Wu Fei took in the room with a sweeping gaze. Floral wallpaper, a few china plates hung up, a curio cabinet full of generic knickknacks, a matching set of 2 armchairs and loveseat, and a wooden coffee table with glass insets. And of course, over a dozen cats congregating in the room. As for the boy, dark hair obscured part of his face, the crooked glasses hiding another part, and a cat rubbing its head against his chin barely left his mouth visible. Far too large clothes hung off of his thin frame in repose. Dirty, scuffed trainers hardly fit to be called shoes rested on his feet. The agent frowned at the boy's apparel. The tea kettle whistled in the kitchen, and the woman could be heard muttering to herself as she pulled it from the stove. Shortly after, clattering china echoed towards the sitting room. Wu Fei hurried to the kitchen and offered to carry the tea tray Mrs. Fig had prepared. She thanked him and complimented his manners. With the tray safely in Wu Fei's steady hands, they re-entered the sitting room. Apparently the steaming kettle had woken Harry. The boy sluggishly sat up, rubbing his eye before straightening his round glasses. He opened his mouth to ask something but froze at the sight of the stranger. Dark eyes met emerald green momentarily. Hello. Chong Wu Fei of Preventers. I'm here as a follow-up for the Family Reconstruction Act registration. Let's sit down to tea, dears, Mrs. Fig urged. Tea time passed uneventfully. Biscuits were eaten, tea drank, and cats sat all around. Now, Mr. Chong, the old woman put her cup and saucer back onto the tray. You said earlier that the registration database found a familial match. The Chinese man dabbed his mouth with a napkin. Yes, it is protocol to verify the findings at a clinic, where possible. Then the parties have the chance to meet and introduce themselves. In this case, Preventer's top medical personnel have verified the match, as this match is to someone of special interest. Wu Fei mimicked the hostess by placing his saucer and cup onto the tray. As I understand it, you, Mrs. Fig, are watching Harry while his relatives are away. Yes, they're on a day trip, and didn't want to leave him at home alone. Harry shifted, uncomfortable being spoken about as if he weren't there. He was glad his babysitter seemed to have found new family or at least news of a missing relative. Wu Fei nodded. In that case, I'll be escorting you both to the clinic, where we'll meet that familial match. Mrs. Fig clapped her hands in excitement. A crazy cat lady she may be, but she caught how vague the agent had been. Harry, be a dear and rinse the tea things. Just set it in the dish drainer when you're done. I'll write a note for your aunt. The nearly 13-year-old nodded. Yes, Mrs. Fig. With that, Harry collected the remainder of the set onto the tray and hurried into the kitchen. Former Gundam pilot Chong Wu Fei almost felt bad for not telling Hero's half-brother the full truth. Part of him wanted his stoic friend to see the surprise on the younger boy's face. Another part of him swore he spent too much time with one duo Maxwell for the sudden mischievousness. Still, he schooled his face into a neutral expression as he idly surveyed the room again. The only difference he noted was that one of the many cats must have been laying on a previously unseen newspaper. Black brows drew together in confusion. It seemed the partially hidden photograph emblazoned on the front page moved. Wu Fei glanced to Mrs. Fig, who sat with her back to him as she wrote out the note for the Dursleys. Confident it would go unnoticed, the preventer gathered the paper for a quick look over. Indeed, the picture moved, showing a man being restrained as he laughed hysterically. The headline identified him as Murderer Sirius Black. A gasp from the elderly woman drew the agent's attention to her. Arabella Fig held a trembling hand over her heart. Her wide eyes flashed from the paper to Wu Fei's face and back again. Apparently the young man understood her shock and sent the newspaper under the sofa cushion with a wordless spell, guided only by a subtle hand gesture and will. Now the squib had a new reason to gasp. Harry stuck his head around the corner, having heard the gasps. Is everything all right? Yes, Mrs. Fig was quick to cover. Just realized I'll need to put out more food and fresh water for my babies. The bespectacled boy nodded before returning to his task. Wu Fei offered to help fill the cat's many dishes, which was accepted. Harry returned to the sitting room as the last bowl was set down. Soon enough, the trio was on their way to the meeting place. Line break. Preventer agent duo Maxwell reclined in a waiting room seat in the FRA-approved clinic. He would occasionally check the GPS in Wu Fei's phone to keep his best friend from overreacting. For said best friend, overreacting could include stalking the little whining suburbs with an automatic machine gun and who knows how many sidearms. Duo could admit, 3 agents seemed a little much to fulfill a simple FRA meet and greet. Between Dr. Jones's suspicions of abuse, neglect and the fact that the familial match was for Hiro Yui, the extra manpower made a bit more sense. Hiro was the one who had a new brother, so his presence was a given. Duo was there to observe if the boy showed signs of the suspected abuse, but his accidental magic had flared destructively when he'd witnessed the abuse firsthand before. And so, Wu Fei was the neutral party to escort the half-brother. The agents that the boy had previously met were on assignment in another part of Surrey. Speaking of those previously met, Dr. Martha Jones had just sat next to him. The woman glanced at the pacing preventer and asked, "Have they got into the car yet?" Duo watched Hiro abruptly turn in that strange way he did while pacing. "Yeah, it looks like they're finally on the way. Wu Fei's had to go to a different house in the neighborhood to get the boy. I guess it took a while to explain what's going on. I mean, it's a lot to take in for a normal nearly 13-year-old, right?" Martha nodded. "I think some adults have trouble initially, too. For some, it's a big shock, being told there's family they never knew about. Or family they had thought dead suddenly pops up." The clinic doors whooshed open to admit two people. Hiro spun to face the newcomers while Duo and Martha leapt to their feet. The two males paused at the sudden attention, then were confused at the sense of disappointment radiating from the others. Amos Diggory placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Hello. We've come to register for that family reconstruction whatnot. Is this the right place?" Dr. Jones approached the two with a happy smile. "Right. You are in the right place. I'm Dr. Martha Jones. Those two," she motioned to Hiro and Duo, "are waiting for someone." Martha fetched a clipboard from behind the reception desk. "Now, I'll take you two back to the exam room separately, so you, sir, will come with me, and the young gentleman may wait here. Shouldn't take more than 20 minutes for each of you." The 15-year-old turned wide brown eyes to his father. "It'll be all right, Seed," Amos assured his son. "Take a seat, and I'll be back in a jiff." Duo, who was still standing, threw an arm around the younger boy's shoulders. "Don't worry, kid. Dr. Jones is nice, and the procedure for FRA registration is simple, if a bit time-consuming. Your dad is in good hands." Gundam Death Scythe's former pilot led the boy to a seat and chatted on about what to expect in the exam room. Hiro stepped outside for a bit of fresh air, murky sunlight, and a moment of quiet. He, the perfect soldier, was nervous to meet a boy roughly 3 years his junior. He could admit to himself that it was strange. He felt no apprehension on dangerous, near-suicidal missions, yet his stomach seemed to clench and roll today of all days. Hiro supposed that the boy was a complete unknown to him, is what caused the pseudo-nausea. The air, dim sunlight, and quiet didn't really help his nerves, but he stayed by the door until he saw Wu Fei's rental car pass on towards the parking lot. There were times Chong Wu Fei wished he required hearing aids. Such instances were rare, but the idea of turning a little knob and whatever annoying chatter would become inaudible was quite tempting. Especially now that he was driving with a bona fide cat lady in the car. At least Harry was pleasantly quiet in the backseat. The streets had surprisingly light traffic, the preventer noted. Of course, he was accustomed to large cities with a much higher population. The occasional grassy park and cluster of trees he found as a nice change from concrete building after concrete building. Nearly any scenery was better than that cookie-cutter neighborhood, Wu Fei supposed with a shudder. At long last, after constant inane rambling about cats, the car turned onto the road with the clinic. Wu Fei ignored the urge to drive faster to escape the confined space. He didn't mind cats, he really didn't, but he was nearing his breaking point. On the short distance to the parking lot, a figure near the automatic doors caught his attention. Messy brown hair, a loose green tank top, faded jeans, and hideous yellow trainers. Yep, that's Hiro, the Chinese teen thought to himself. Harry Potter was a little excited. He had expected to spend the entire day at Mrs. Fig's house, surrounded by cats. He had at least managed to let his snowy owl, Hedwig, out of the house before Vernon had practically dragged him out to the car. Despite carrying the scent of predator bird, the boy still had gotten covered with cats. Some of the felines hadn't liked him from the start, but he hadn't had them laying on him before. But he was somewhere new, and that sparked a bit of excitement. Harry was also curious to see Mrs. Fig's recently found family member. The young wizard agreed with his babysitter as they clambered from the car. It was rather exciting. By the time the trio reached the clinic's doors, Hiro had already gone back inside. Wu Fei led Arabella Fig and Harry Potter through the threshold, then he chose a clear space of wall to lean against. Shenlong's former pilot noted the brown-eyed teenager who Duo seemed to be distracting from the assumed upcoming procedure. The Japanese pilot straightened from drinking from the shiny water fountain. Mrs. Fig took a seat a polite distance from the others, with Harry sitting at her side. The brown-eyed teen stared at Harry for a few seconds. "Excuse me a moment," he told Duo. Then leaned forward to rest his elbows on his knees. "Hello, Harry. Having a good summer so far?" The green-eyed teen startled. "Not too bad. But, how do you know my name?" "Oh, sorry. I'm the Hufflepuff Seeker, Cedric Diggory." The now identified Cedric blushed in embarrassment. My dad and I are here for the family reconstruction registration. We're sort of hoping to find some of my mum's family." Harry nodded. "Good luck, then. My neighbor, Mrs. Fig, just received word of a found family member. I was at her house and was brought along." For her part, Mrs. Fig was glad to see Harry interacting on friendly terms with the other boy. Dudley had turned all the children in their own neighborhood against him. She smiled at Cedric's polite "Congratulations," directed at her. Duo and Hero both leveled confused expressions at Wu Fei. The Chinese teen smirked and mouthed the word, "surprise." Wu Fei pushed off from the wall. "Actually, Mr. Potter," he paused until the three non-preventers looked at him, "that isn't entirely accurate." A mischievous smile twisted his lips and his dark eyes twinkled in mirth. "The match in our database was for you, not Mrs. Fig." Harry was pretty sure he was gaping like a goldfish out of water. He quickly thought back to everything the older teen had said at Mrs. Fig's house, only to realize he never really specified which of them had the familial match. A clap to his shoulder startled him out of his shock. Cedric grinned at him and squeezed his shoulder. "Me," Harry whispered, "but I'm an only child, my parents are dead, and I live with my mum's last living relatives." The Chinese preventer crouched in front of Harry's chair. "According to our specialists, the match is a half-sibling through your father's side of things. I happen to personally know this individual. I can already tell some similarities features between the two of you." My dad had another kid." The green-eyed boy breathed deeply. "Yes, it would seem," Wu Fei confirmed. "He, like you, is an orphan, and we know nothing of his mother. But he is here to meet you." Still reeling in surprise, Harry glanced around the room. There was Mrs. Fig beside him, Cedric a couple seats down, an older boy with long braided hair next to Cedric, Wu Fei crouched in front of Harry, and another older boy leaning against a wall. He recognized the outfit belonging to the person that had stood at the clinic doors as they had driven to the parking lot. Now that he was closer, Harry noticed the intense blue eyes staring back at him. Wu Fei's mention of similar features rung true as he studied the older teen. Hero's dark blue eyes met Harry's green eyes across the room. His mind flashed to the medical report, and indeed, Harry was small and underweight for his age. The younger boy was dressed in oversized cast-offs that could almost be considered rags, as he appeared even smaller. A large bruise shone from under the floppy sleeve that reached his elbow. Behind bent, round glasses, Harry's green shone with wonder. Dew observed, unusually quiet. Despite his carefree exterior, he had been hyper-aware since Harry and the old lady arrived. He mentally catalogued details about the boy, everything from the baggy clothes to the partially visible bruises to the glasses he suspected might not even be the correct prescription. Another thing he noted was how Hero's hardened gaze seemed to soften just a bit when he met his half-brother's stare. Duo really wished he had an inconspicuous camera on hand. Wu Fei gracefully rose to standing. He strolled to Hero's side and nudged the other teen. "Your turn." The former pilot of Gundam Wing Zero automatically moved forward. He stopped approximately an arm's length from Harry. "I am called Hiro Yui, as my original name was lost. I look forward to getting acquainted with you." Hiro offered a handshake. Harry shakily stood and wiped his sweaty palms on his pants. "I'm Harry Potter. It's nice to meet you, Hiro. I have to say, it's going to take a bit before this seems real to me." Came unexpectedly, it did. The youngest teen shook hands with his half-brother. The room seemed to hold its breath as everyone waited for something to happen or to be said. A moment later, Dr. Jones led Amos Diggory to the waiting room. A look of relief graced the man's features, and he and his son exchanged smiles. "You're up, Seed," Martha called. The brown-eyed teen ambled over to the doctor while his father sat away from the teenagers and whatever kind of drama between the two messy-haired boys. Arabella turned to Amos. "Half-brothers meeting for the first time. Oh, this is exciting." Harry awkwardly shifted his weight. He was becoming increasingly uncomfortable under Hero's intense stare. "So, do you go to school or have a job?" Hero gestured toward Duo. "Shall we sit?" The two sat next to the braided teen, who smiled encouragingly at them from his seat. To answer your question, I work with the preventers. We are, like international, intergalactic police. The former pilot hesitated just a heartbeat, he wasn't good at small talk. Where do you go to school? It's a boarding school in Scotland. My parents attended there, so they invited me to go, too. That boy, Cedric, he attends too, but we're in different houses, dormitory groups. Harry played with the hem of his shirt nervously. He might have gone into more detail about Hogwarts, but Mr. Diggory might overhear and then they'd all be in trouble. Do you live close by? My primary residence is in the employee housing near the Preventer's main office. It is a Spartan apartment, and I am often away on missions. I am currently stationed near London. Duo decided to join the conversation. Our boss entrusted Hero with a very important mission while he's here. A sort of, since he's here anyway, kind of situation. Poor He-Man has to convince some backwards community to register with the fraud database. Wu Fei took a seat near the other three teens as Harry questioned the nickname. Duo here gives his friends nicknames. Hero is sometimes He-Man, sometimes He-Chan. He calls me either Wu-Man or Wuffers, and I despise the second one. Our friend, Catra, is Cat, Q-Bean, or Goldie. Our other friend, Troa, usually only has his name shortened to Tro. Duo also has the disrespectful habit of calling our boss, known as Lady Un baby. Don't worry, Harry, Duo joked. I'll find a nice nickname for you, too. Harry snorted, while Wu Fei rolled his eyes and Hero scoffed. Amos Diggory and Arabella Figg had a conversation separate from the boys. They quietly discussed the event of Sirius Black's escape from Azkaban, both stumped on how he managed such a feat. Somehow the topic wove around to Diggory's cat recently having a litter, and the crazy cat lady aspect of Mrs. Figg came out. At least I know who is asked about tending to the kittens now, Amos thought, bemused. Soon enough, Cedric was led back to the waiting room by a smirking Dr. Jones. Cedric was blushing pretty fiercely from her explanation of safe sex and condoms. While the boy appreciated the simple, no-nonsense phrasing, the topic in general was what set off the blush. That, and she gave him a handful of condoms, which he stuffed into his pocket before the others could see. Amos arched an eyebrow at the sight of his son's red cheeks. Everything all right, Seed? Yeah, Dad, Cedric stuttered. Dr. Jones was talking about, reproductive health. Our regular clinic doesn't really, go into so much detail on that. Cedric felt better when his father's face pinked as he looked to a random corner. Duo, having heard the conversation between father and son, snickered at their discomfort. Wu Fei shook his head sadly, Hero lightly smirked, and young Harry was confused by virtue of not having the talk yet. Mrs. Figg daintily covered her smile with a loosely curled fist. Martha grinned at the group of preventers. That was quick for a familial match, Harry. She clapped her hands once. Now, in honor of the first meeting hosted by this clinic, there's a light lunch available in the break room. Diggory's, you're welcome, too. Harry blushed for the kind doctor's attention, especially that she remembered his name. 5 teenagers and 2 adults followed Martha to the break room, which might be more accurately termed employee lounge. Place settings of disposable plates, cups, and utensils were set at every seat. The refrigerator was of the French door variety with an ice dispenser built in. The countertop was covered in a variety of picnic-type foodstuffs, while serving utensils rested on napkins next to each container. Wu Fei turned to Martha. Did you do all of this by yourself? No, the doctor replied. The nurses brought in most of it. Just me in the office today, but whatever is left over will be eaten the next time the staff work. Everyone helped themselves in an orderly fashion. Martha declared that Harry and Hero had to go first, as the luncheon was celebrating their first meeting. At the long table, there was more than enough room for 8 people. The head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, Amelia Bones, patiently waited for her turn. She had gathered a handful of her Aurors and marched the lot of them to the closest FRA registration site. Madame Bones was surprised that some of her department had already registered, such as Nymphadora Tonks and Kingsley Shacklebolt. Still, she had to flat out order this group to register. 2 were pureblood wizards that frowned on everything Muggle. 1 was so behind on her paperwork that she'd carried a stack with her. Another Auror was simply afraid of needles. The last of the current group was so sure he was close to a break in his current case. The registration staff must have the patience of saints, Amelia mused. One of the pureblood, Dalahov, was turning red in the face at the seemingly regulation questions. Have you had a blood transfusion or a bone marrow transplant? Were very important in this process, as the technology found the familial identifiers were somehow enclosed in the samples. Truthfully, Madame Bones didn't know exactly how that worked, but she could see how transplants from another person would affect the sample results. Slowly but surely, she was beginning to understand Arthur Weasley's fascination with Muggle things. One of the waiting Aurors suddenly stood, and the reason was soon apparent as Minister Cornelius Fudge was escorted through the automatic doors by two preventers. Amelia also stood from her seat, to better observe the agents. At first the witch thought them both women. The taller preventer was mostly behind Fudge, so the wide shoulders and flat chest wasn't initially obvious. The shorter agent walked ahead of the minister, her lean physique still feminine. Minister Fudge, Amelia Bones greeted. I wasn't aware you had an appointment to register for the FRA. I would have postponed the Aurors getting registered. But we're all here now. Cornelius couldn't make himself adopt a pleasant expression. These preventers are preventing me from getting to my work. The summons agent Hiro Yui served you allowed plenty of time for you to register on your own time. The tall man behind Fudge had a surprisingly deep voice. He moved to guard the door, crossing his arms as he leaned against the wall. His partner approached the check-in counter and collected paperwork for the pudgy wizard. The female agent passed the clipboard and ink pen to Fudge's hesitant grip. Here you go. Let's have a seat, and I'll help you if you have any questions. I'd imagine you don't have much experience with medical forms. Showing a patience roughly on par with the nurses, the woman herded her charge to an empty chair. Amelia joined the standing preventer against the wall. Salutations. My name is Amelia Bones. I'm the head of our Department of Magical Law Enforcement, or the DMLE for short. The man turned pale blue eyes onto the witch. Preventer Agent Zex Merquise. Agent Yui spoke highly of you in his report. Glad to know I've made a favorable impression. His dry wit diffused a tense moment. Amelia smirked at the memory. Zex snorted. Yui is hardly known for his humor. His intelligence is as sharp as a scalpel, but I'd imagine his wit is as dry as burnt toast. Madame Bones glanced at Fudge, who was frowning at the forms and pen. Have you met the minister's secretary? At the man's shudder, the witch took as a yes and continued. Mr. Yui may have mentioned a Muggle fable where a prince is turned into a frog and that apparently the spell is gender-specific. Being raised in an aristocratic household, Zex didn't laugh out loud, but the smirk was unmissable. Appropriate, although I would not have expected such from him. He can be painfully blunt at times. You know him personally, Amelia concluded. Indeed, he agreed without elaborating. Comfortable silence engulfed the odd pair. And an odd pair they were. Madame Amelia Bones was of average height, fit for her age, and dressed in charcoal gray robes. Her salt and pepper hair was pulled back into a simple twist, and a monocle covered one sharp eye. Zex, by contrast, was quite tall, and his preventer uniform hinted at firm muscles. His long hair was a paler blonde than that of Lucius Malfoy, and a thin layer of fringe coupled with his light blue eyes brought to mind a large cat peering through tall grass. Both agent and witch surveyed the waiting room. Several Aurors stood, paced, or sat as they awaited their turn, their crimson robes bold in the neutral-toned room. Cornelius Fudge still struggled with the intake forms, sweat dotting his brow, and his plum robes clashing with his lime-green bowler hat and waistcoat. And last but not least, the unnamed female preventer with short dark blue hair and eyes. After apparently a few minutes of thought, Zex spoke. I am unsure if you or your government are aware, but they're magicals employed in preventers, probably more than we agents realize. For example, my partner, he nodded to the blue-haired woman, Lucrezia Noyne is the granddaughter of a squib that had been disowned by a pure-blood family. She has displayed a handful of accidental magic instances. Also the summons Fudge received was spelled by one of our agents. Whoever touches the summons will be added to our list of those to be registered. Some of Preventer's best agents are actually witches and wizards untrained in the magical arts. Madame Bones nodded. I would assume that Mr. Yui is one of these untrained wizards. There are wards that hide the ministry from non-magicals, you see. Understandable, and yes, Hiro Yui is untrained in magic. I suspect his magic manifested mostly as strengthening his body and accelerating his healing, considering his medical report. Zex glanced at the witch beside him. It is currently theorized that the magic of the untrained manifests in a way that would help that individual survive and possibly operates on a subconscious level, by instinct, in other words. An interesting theory, indeed, Amelia conceded. The more I speak with you, the more I think our ministry and communities are too isolated from the rest of the world. The preventer smiled grimly. Not all of the recent developments have been good. We have our own flaws and our own bigots and such. But I do advocate understanding those different from ourselves, and understanding comes from learning of it. At last, Agent Nguyen rose from her seat next to the minister and turned in the finally completed forms. She joined her partner and the witch at the wall. That could have gone worse, she tried to assure herself. Zex chuckled, and Nguyen smiled at him. Careful, or else you'll be talking the toad through the paperwork. His expression fell into a grimace. Preventers Malcolm and Lydia stood just outside the gates of Malfoy Manor. They had spoken with a house elf not a moment before, and the creature said it would inform its masters of their presence. An albino peacock strutted on the other side of the bars. Tillmont the house elf popped into the sitting room and bowed to Narcissa Malfoy. Mistress, the escorts are at the gates. They say the appointment is shortly, mistress. The witch set aside her stitching project. I shall speak with them, she replied. Tillmont popped away, and Narcissa headed to the ornate wrought iron gates. Once there, she coldly regarded the man and woman garbed in preventers' uniforms. I am the lady of the house. May I help you? Agent Malcolm smiled in greeting despite the witch's cold tone. Good day, madam. A representative of preventers spoke with your husband, Lucius Malfoy. It was agreed that the Malfoy household would register in accordance to the Family Reconstruction Act, an international law that has gone into effect. Madame Malfoy suspiciously eyed the pair. Lucius has not mentioned any such appointment to me, sir. The female agent shrugged. Perhaps it slipped his mind, ma'am. The appointment still stands, however. Malcolm queried, are you familiar with the Family Reconstruction Act? At her blank face, he continued. It is intended to reunite families separated by war. We use non-magical means of identifying people, and a computer searches for familial matches. If, say, a cousin went missing and later registers, the database will be able to recognize that person. Agent Lydia smacked her partner's arm. You're not explaining it well at all, Malcolm. She turned back to the skeptical woman. Sorry about him. How the registration and database works is that the staff at the clinic will gather a small blood sample and discuss your known family. The sample will be processed through a machine that will identify specific markers. The results will be submitted to registration's database. From there, computers will compare your results to the results of everyone else who has registered. If the computer finds a match or partial match, the files are sent to a specialized agent, and notices are sent to the affected persons. Understanding shone in Narcissa's eyes. I see. Just a moment, agents. I will collect my son for this registration. She turned towards her home but paused. Would you like to come in? My house elf can provide tea. We'll be all right to wait here, Malcolm assured. As luck would have it, shortly after Narcissa and Draco Malfoy arrived with their preventer escorts, Agents Zex and Nguyen returned with a short, toad-like witch in tow. Mrs. Malfoy sat prim and proper as she filled in the required forms. Draco flipped through a magazine in his seat next to his mother. Lucrezia Nguyen generally considered herself a patient person. She had known Zex for years in the military. She withstood Wu-Fei's women should not be soldiers spiel when they had first met, and she had acted as Relina's bodyguard and chief of security once upon a time. Her patience had even extended to helping the blundering Minister Fudge. But this woman, this witch with capital B, had Nguyen fingering the taser hidden under her jacket. Not only that, the effort of his restraint was showing through Zex's poker face. Like their previous trip to the clinic, Nguyen collected the paperwork from the desk and her partner took up wall space. Unlike last time, the female joined the former prince at the wall right away. Dolores Umbridge took a seat close to Madame Malfoy, much to the noblewoman's displeasure. Although Narcissa shared some of the ministry witch's blood purist views, the mother found many of Umbridge's idea too extreme or just plain stupid. Madame Malfoy honestly hated to hear the other witch's forced high, girly voice and horrid fashion sense. Yet for the sake of her husband's political ties, the former black utilized all the behavioral lessons of her youth. That is, maintain a neutral expression and speak as little as possible. As the toad-like witch grumbled and struggled with paperwork, the preventers who had escorted her shared a vindictive smile. They had agreed at a glance to not aid her. It may be petty, but neither agent could stand her. Dr. Martha Jones watched with a satisfied smile as Harry and Hero chatted during their second meeting. Again, the younger boy was dressed in oversized rags. While Harry's overall appearance had not improved, his green eyes shone brighter, obviously happy to visit with his half-brother. The older brother's blue eyes seemed warmer while regarding Harry. Martha wasn't the only one observing the second meeting. The boy with the long braided hair had returned, dressed in his preventor's uniform. Duo had been the one to collect Harry Potter from the Dursley house, and he was still silently fuming at the family's treatment of the underdeveloped boy, not to mention, they treated Duo with thinly veiled scorn. To see his best friend soften with the British child eased Duo's unvoiced concern. It was during this visit that conversation mostly stayed on the topic of Harry's school. The students were divided into 4 houses, the bespectacled boy explained. Each house had its own set of dormitories, colors, and mascots. Harry was in Gryffindor House, with the colors of red and gold and the lion mascot, while Cedric Diggory belonged in Hufflepuff, the yellow and black badgers. The school, which Harry let slip was called Hogwarts, was in an old castle with towers and torrents, with a lake and forest and greenhouses. The groundskeeper was an enormous man named Hagrid, and the caretaker was the grumpy Mr. Filch. Martha giggled. My mum told me about Mr. Filch. Obsessed with his cat, he is. And Mr. Rubius Hagrid, she said, such a gentle giant of a man. The 3 males looked at the doctor with varying levels of surprise. Don't tell me you forgot I was here, she teased. Seriously, my mother was in Ravenclaw. 3 pairs of eyes followed her hand as she reached to toy with the polished wood holding her hair into a messy bun. Polished wood, part of which looked like a handle. A wand, the boys realized. Harry sent an awkward smile to the pretty doctor while Duo grinned. Hero let his shoulders slump in relief, realizing that they could speak freely of magic. As they all were again in the clinic's break room, they shared a couple pizzas, one of pepperoni and the other supreme. Duo stood a fair distance from the pizza, and with a mischievous eye twinkle and a jerking hand motion, a slice of supreme pizza zoomed to his waiting hands. The former pilot of Death Scythe groaned in appreciation as the favors registered in his mouth. Harry stared a moment, his mouth slack and fortunately empty. Dr. Jones clapped for the wordless spell. The perfect soldier shook his head at Duo's use of magic. Obviously, Hero deadpanned, we have a bit more to talk about. Green eyes turned to the Asian teen. Are you a wizard too? A shrug was the reply. I have not had formal magical training, but I do have some magical ability. Duo snorted. Some magical ability, he says. Cushioning charms, shield charms, somehow slowing his falls all without magical training or a focus object. Compared to your Accios, notice me nots, and stealth, Hero countered, to which the L02 native snickered. Reality set in for Harry Potter. He didn't have to hide his magic from his new brother. Or his friends. One of the widest smiles of his life graced his face. Now that Harry knew he would not be breaking the statute of secrecy, he regaled the others with funny stories from school. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. The time had come for the visit to come to a close. Martha hugged each of the boys in farewell, having walked with them to the unmarked sedan. During the short ride back to Privet Drive, they made plans for an overnight visit in a few days. Both Hero and Duo escorted Harry to the door of number 4. The smallest teen went rigid as barking echoed from the house. Duo frowned. There wasn't a dog here before. Pilot 01 rapped his knuckles against the door's painted wood, and the barking grew louder and more insistent. The trio waited on the front step a moment before someone came to the door. Who is it? Petunia Dursley called. Duo rolled his eyes. Preventer Maxwell. Ma'am, we need to talk just a minute. The thin woman opened the door and urgently ushered the boys inside and out of the eyes of the neighbors. She attempted a neutral expression but failed miserably. Hero cleared his throat to gain Petunia's attention, as the woman had been half glaring at Harry. Mrs. Dursley, I understand you are Harry's aunt and primary legal guardian. That's right, Petunia confirmed, eyeing the blue-eyed Asian. Took in the ungrateful brat out of the goodness of our hearts. We could have sent him to an orphanage, finding him on the front step. Harry wanted to sink into the floor and disappear, a feeling that had begun at Ripper's barking. He had avoided talking about the Dursleys as much as possible to his new brother. And now it looked like Aunt Petunia was going to spout the lies she told all the neighbors. Marge Dursley, sister to Vernon, lumbered into the hall. Oh, there you are, Petunia dear. Ripper the bulldog growled from his position tucked under his owner's arm. The thinner woman twitched hard before turning to her sister-in-law. Nothing to worry about, Marge. Preventer Maxwell was bringing the boy back. What trouble has that riffraff caused now, to be involving preventers? Marge rumbled. Duo interjected. Actually, Harry came with me as part of the Family Reconstruction Act. Our database found a familial match on his father's side, so Harry here got to meet his half-brother. Marge eyed the teens suspiciously. How about we move into the sitting room? Where are my manners? Petunia flustered. Of course, this way. Harry and the pilots could tell that she didn't want to invite them further into the house. The thin woman perched on an armchair, Marge settled into the recliner, and the three boys took the couch. So, Duo started the conversation. I'm Duo Maxwell, and that, a thumb jerk, is Hiro Yui. We're Preventer agents. Yui is here in Britain on a special assignment, and the match was identified just in time for him to multitask. Marge took a rather deep pull from her tumbler. You boys seem awfully young to be law enforcement. Makes me wonder just what sort of special assignment you could handle. Hiro spoke up. My mission is to convince a particular pocket of the UK's population to register in accordance to the FRA. While similar groups in other countries have made great headway in complying, the UK's problematic group is being stubborn. Must be the same lot Lily fell in with, Petunia shrugged. Standing against what's normal and proper, the lot of them. Duo snorted. Didn't a couple Preventer agents have to collect your family for registration? Agents Noah and Nicole noted your opposition and resistance in their report. Petunia's cheeks blotched red in indignation. Back to the topic, Hiro commanded. I have met with my half-brother. Duo commented. That still feels weird. Harry, twice and would like to arrange an overnight visitation. As you are his primary guardian, details must be discussed with you. Fine, the thin woman snapped. Boy, gather your things. Cold eyes turned to the Preventers as Harry scurried from the room. Take him and now and keep him for as long as you like. Let his freakishness be your problem for a time. Marge Dursley may not have liked Harry, having believed everything Vernon told her about the child, but sending him away with strangers seemed odd. Surely such a problem child would warrant some warning for those taking him. Harry had fled at his aunt's command. He fought tears as her acidic words reached his ears. Who knew what his aunt would tell the two older teens? He blindly scampered up the stairs to the bedroom door with multiple locks on the outside. The boy snatched up one of Dudley's discarded school bags, with a broken strap and burst zipper, and stuffed some clothes inside. While the younger boy was upstairs, Duo leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Mrs. Dursley, can you explain why the clinic diagnosed Harry with long-term malnourishment, especially during the core developmental phase? Or why the physical checkup found years' worth of layered scars on him? Or even the numerous improperly healed fractures, aka broken bones? Petunia gaped at him, and Marge blinked in surprise. Even Ripper seemed stunned into silence. Can you explain, Hiro added, why both times I have seen him, Harry has worn hand-me-downs from an obviously obese child, yet Harry shows physical signs of long-term starvation? Why a child nearly 13 years old is the size of a small 11-year-old? Tell ya what. Duo donned a fake smile, intent on investigating further. I'll help Harry get his stuff. Man, ya wanna take Harry for the rest of the summer? We can put some meat on his bones before he goes back to school, if nothing else. Oh, yes, Petunia seethed as the long-haired teen exited the sitting room. Street. Brutus School for Incurably Criminal Boys. Hiro maintained his alert yet relaxed posture but tilted his head as a sign of conflicting data. So we heard from the babysitter. However, we looked it up. Do you know what we found? Nothing. No such school exits. Not by that name or by that purpose. You, madam, are lying, and lying poorly at that. Duo's specialty is identifying those who have been abused. Hiro pulled a sealed envelope from his jacket pocket. Preventers have filed a motion with Family Services to have Harry James Potter removed from your custody, citing extreme malnourishment, physical abuse, emotional abuse, and neglect. You have been served. The envelope found its way to Petunia's bony knees as Hiro stood and moved to leave the room. We're still deciding whether or not to file criminal charges. Marge absently stroked Ripper's short, coarse coat. Her mind was reeling from the accusations leveled against her brother's family. Thinking back, she couldn't recall a time Harry wore something besides Dudley's cast-offs. Still, the obese woman didn't want to admit to her brother being in the wrong. Gundam Wing and Harry Potter belong to their respective owners, and no monetary gain is received from this work of fanfiction. Hiro's warning of possible legal action still hung heavy in the air. Duo and Harry soon appeared in the doorway. Aunt Petunia, Harry quietly called. They said I may spend the rest of summer break with them. So, I probably need my school things. The trunk is still in the cupboard, right? Vernon has the key, was the hissed reply. Petunia Dursley obviously did not enjoy having her tales unspun before witnesses. Duo took to leaning against the wall in order to eavesdrop on the women. Harry and Hero strode to the kitchen, where Vernon and Dudley split a tray of biscuits cookies. Mr. Dursley, Hero extended a hand toward the walrus of a man. I am Hero Yui, half-brother to your nephew. Your wife gave permission for Harry to come with me until his school resumes in September. However, he'll need his school things from the cupboard. Vernon Dursley, Hero decided, was not a bright man. A humorous expression of curiosity and suspicion touched the fat man's face, made funnier by the bushy eyebrows and mustache. Very well, Vernon hoisted himself to his feet, and the chair legs squealed against the floor. At least you're polite, unlike those wackos that got him last year. Hero arched a nonchalant brow at the man's dark mutters and Harry's embarrassed blush. Dudley, true to form, pulled the tray of sweets closer to his seat and ignored the going-ons around him. The pilot and wizard followed Vernon's broad backside to the little door under the stairs. Despite his pudgy hands, Vernon deftly located the small key on his keyring and had the padlock open in a jiffy. The big man stepped aside. We put away his school things to make sure he doesn't tear up anything. With that, Vernon joined his wife and sister in the sitting room. Duo, being just down the hall, heard the large man's explanation of why the trunk was in the locked cupboard. Never mind the kids' summer homework, he muttered as Vernon passed. The long-haired teen joined his companions at the little door under the stairs. Duo flipped the latch and opened the door with a slight creaking sound. I need to get Hedwig's cage, Harry excused himself. Just in time, too, judging by the sudden tension in Duo's shoulders. The trunk sat on what looked to be a small cot that still had a couple faded blankets on it. The braided pilot angled the trunk to pull from the little cupboard when his eyes landed on something that simultaneously turned his blood to lava and his stomach to ice. A yellowed crayon sign was push-pinned to the wall next to the door. Harry's room would be visible if a small child were on the cot. Hero watched as Duo jerked out of the cupboard under the stairs faster than if a snake were about to strike, and sped to the simple washroom nearby. The sound of running water reached him, as well as rattling toiletries if he strained his ears. He looked to see what had brought such a reaction from his friend. At first, nothing caught his eye, but when he bent to retrieve the trunk, the Harry's room sign came into view. Mentally going through the brush strokes of hiragana, Hero pulled the black trunk fully from the tiny cupboard. He noted the flat pillow, dusty sheets, and rumpled blankets still on what had obviously served as a bed within the storage space. Duo emerged from the washroom with his face dry but his fringe wet. His blue eyes gleamed violet with suppressed anger. Hero set the trunk to the side of the front door before meeting his friend's eyes. You saw it too, seemed to be conveyed in the long-haired boy's gaze, to which the Asian boy nodded. Hurried footsteps on the stairs sent a small rain of dust onto the cot. Harry clutched a satchel under one arm while Hedwig's cage took up his other hand. Both pilots cleared their expressions to neutral at the young wizard's approach. The two older boys fell in behind the youngest. Harry poked his head into the sitting room. Right, we're off then. Bye. Withering glares from his aunt and uncle met him, while Marge at least gave a curt nod. Duo, having the keys, opened the front door and dashed to open the boot car trunk of the dark sedan. Hero easily lifted the school trunk and carried it to where his friend stood by the car. They worked together to ease the black luggage into the boot. Harry hustled after his half-brother. A hoot from the fence drew his green gaze. Hedwig, there you are, girl. I'm going with them, a nod toward the car. Do you want to follow the car or ride inside your cage? The snowy owl winged her way onto the car's roof. In the car, a regal nod. All right then. Harry set the gleaming cage onto the roof and unlatched the wire door with one hand. He then opened the backseat door and put the satchel in the floorboard. Whoa, that's a pretty owl, Duo exclaimed. Harry looked from Duo to the snowy owl already in her cage. Yeah, her name is Hedwig. She's my first ever birthday present. We've been together for almost 2 years now. Let's get her settled into the backseat. Hero gently moved the cage onto the seat. He paused a moment, then pulled the seatbelt across the bars to secure the bird. Dark blue eyes watched as his green-eyed brother buckled himself into the backseat beside his owl. The brothers shared a small smile before Hero joined Duo in the front, where the long-haired boy was in the driver's seat. Ever the joker, Duo adopted a nasally voice, PSSSSHT. Welcome. Keep your hands and feet inside the ride at all times. Fasten your seat belts, kiddies. We're about to go. He had started the car during the speech and put it into reverse at go. His effort at humor paid off with quiet laughter from the boy behind him. Despite the drama at number 4 Privet Drive, the car ride to London was rather uneventful. Hiro manned the radio dial, finding a station with currently popular music as they passed through different coverage areas. Duo occasionally sang along or drummed the steering wheel. Harry had dozed off while watching the scenery pass by his window. Hedwig the owl had long ago tucked her head under her wing for sleep. Soon enough, they arrived at the apartment building Preventers had purchased. The brick building was formerly owned by a near-destitute older man. Mr. Sebastian Waters had acted as landlord, repairman, rent collector, and maintenance for the better part of 20 years. The numerous renters had moved out in the last 5 years for various reasons: newer apartment, buying a house, to be closer to work. There were those who couldn't afford the newer, nicer apartment. Those people stayed. When Preventers bought the property, Mr. Waters and all his tenants were given the choice to stay or go. Anyone that left was given a small sum to aid in finding a new home, and all who stayed were given a month rent-free. The Preventer representative, in this case Hilde Speicher, noted that some of the tenants were struggling professionals. As such, she offered each a deal. Rent discounts would be given to those who helped renovate the empty flats. Electricians, carpenters, drywall layers, painters, and some others took the deal. A working system was created easily enough. Hilde enlisted the aid of housewives to find inexpensive furnishings as the flats were finished one at a time. Having worked as a scavenger, Hilde often provided a simple meal to the workers. After all, a hungry crew was an unhappy crew, which meant less quality work. The first few multi-bedroom flats were allotted to Preventer agents that had long-term assignments and working out of hotels and motels. These flats were given only basic furnishings, with the bedrooms holding a set of bunk beds and a dresser for each bed. Hilde opted to split a 2-bedroom apartment with agents Noah and Nicole, siblings assigned to the FRA registration. The single-bedroom flats were also provided basic furnishings. Their bedrooms give a full-sized bed, a nightstand, and a chest of drawers. Hilde suggested to Mr. Waters putting out ads on the universities and coffee shops to draw in students. Within that week, a student moved in, quickly followed by a homely bachelor. Hiro directed Duo to a parking deck near the Preventer's own building. The perfect soldier wasn't sure if Duo knew of Hilde's presence in the renovated complex. Well, Hiro corrected himself, renovation in progress. Pilot 02 woke the snoozing wizard as 01 pulled the bird cage out of the car. A minor distraction came in the form of another sedan pulling into a nearby space. Duo chuckled at the vinyl decal on the back window, a white peace sign. "Looks like Zex is here," the long-haired teen announced. Indeed, Zex Merquise climbed from the car, with Lucretia Noin following suit. "Yui, Maxwell," the tall man greeted, smirking at the winged cross decal on their car. "Didn't realize you two were here," Duo replied. Noin sighed. "We've been escorting ministry workers to register in the FRA database. They waste so much time arguing about going." "Ouch," the L2 native sympathized. Zex's pale blue gaze landed on Harry. "And who is this?" The bespectacled boy stifled a yawn, not quite awake enough to feel awkward at the attention. Hiro replied, "He is my recently located half-brother, Harry." When the group left the parking deck, Hiro and Zex each held an end of Harry's trunk. Noin carried Hedwig in her cage, and Duo led the groggy Harry into the apartment building. Mr. Waters met the group in the large dumb-waiter-type elevator, and the old man worked the controls to take them to Hiro's floor. The messy-haired pilot led the way to the smallest 2-bedroom flat on this level. Once all 5, 6 if one counted the owl, of them had entered and the door firmly shut, Hiro relayed a bit of information in his usual blunt manner. "Harry is magical," he announced without any preamble. He took hold of both sides of the trunk and set it just inside the bedroom with a window. The boy in question fidgeted, suddenly awake and watching the tall man and short-haired woman in apprehension. The woman passes Hedwig's cage to the young wizard. "Hi, I'm Lucretia Noin, just Noin is fine. Hiro has been, succinct in his words about you." The pale-haired man nodded. 2 definitive sentences, to be exact. "I'm afraid you'll find Hiro lacking in most social graces. By the way, I am Zex Merquise, but I was born Miliardo Peacecraft of the Sankt Kingdom." Zex drew his wand from under his jacket sleeve and muttered mufflando at the door. What most of Europe doesn't realize, is that Sankt was predominantly magical. The Sankt Kingdom had its own school of magic, Rumors suggest it rivaled Bobaton's in quality education. Unfortunately, the country fell into ruins when my birth parents were assassinated, and my sister and I were smuggled away to be adopted by different families. Sank's fall was before you were born, Harry Potter. But her people live on. Duo and Noin stared at Zex for a moment. Then, the corner of Duo's mouth twitched. That was random. Informative, but random. Noin shook her head. It was all details a pureblood wizard should know. Or at least, someone from a noble house. Hiro's dark blue eyes bore into the prince. Zex, I would appreciate lessons on what we missed as having non-magical upbringings. Certainly, came the easy reply. I presume we will be heading to Gringotts tomorrow. At 3 Stumped Stairs, Harry offered, Wizarding Bank. It's in Diagon Alley. But why would we need to go to the bank? Duo rolled his eyes. Let's sit down. I have a feeling this will take a while. Harry went to put Hedwig in the darkened room that Hiro had set his trunk and opened the cage door in case she should want out. When he returned, he found that the others had already found some surface to sit in the common room. Harry claimed a spot next to Hiro. So, why do we need to go to Gringotts? Zex sat straight, posture perfect, with the ankle crossed over his knee. His explanation included Hiro claiming his place as a Potter, changing of custody, and reviewing the Potter's properties and finances. The hidden prince assured the newly acquainted brothers that he had every intention to guide them through the process. Noin added that she would use makeup to hide Harry's distinctive scar, hoping to have their day run smoother. As the group bid farewell for the evening, Zex offered handshakes to the males while Noin pulled each in turn into a hug. Harry, understandably, was a little flustered by the hug, which earned a hair tussle from the smirking woman. Duo flopped onto the couch, muttering, surprisingly comfy. Hiro browsed through the kitchen for something to cook for dinner. While those two were occupied, Harry decided to investigate the room he had been given. Hedwig, I'm going to turn on the light, he warned before doing just that. His black school trunk sat at the foot of a wooden-framed twin-sized bed. A chest of drawers stood next to Hedwig's cage, which was currently on the floor. The window was curtained in dark khaki and the pane of glass would side up to open. The floor was covered in a faux hardwood laminate. The bedclothes included a khaki and navy blue plaid blanket and navy blue sheets while the 2 pillowcases matched the curtains. A dark wood suit stand offered a decent perch for Hedwig. Harry moved the cage to on top of the chest of drawers and offered an arm to his beloved owl. With a quiet hoot, she hopped onto his arm. The wizard showed her their new room, letting her test the headboard and footboard for grip. She accepted the suit stand as a perch while her owner opened the window. Hedwig preened herself as Harry started unpacking the satchel. Clothes went into the chest of drawers, and the owl's food and water bowls were carefully laid out. Duo knocked on the open door. Hey, kiddo. Settling in all right? Yeah, the younger boy replied. He opened his trunk and gathered his school robes. The braided teen glanced into one of the still open drawers. So, any of that actually fit? Not really, a helpless shrug, but that's all I've got. My school stuff fits, though. Blue eyes closed in a grimace, apparently remembering what he'd seen the other boy wear so far. You'd be better off borrowing from Mir Hero until we can take you clothes shopping. It'd still be roomy, but not nearly as bad as, a point towards the open drawer, those. Harry gave the brown-haired teen a shocked face. You'd lend me clothes and take me to buy my own. I mean, we've barely met, really. Well, yeah, can't have you running around in raggedy tents, can we? A sardonic chuckle escaped. Anyway, I was going to check out of my motel room and bring my stuff here. I figure I can help you guys before I receive my next mission objective. So you'd be staying here. With Hiro and me. In the building at least. The couch is pretty comfy, so I won't be in the way too much. Besides, I'll be able to keep you company while Hiro is working, and I'd imagine he'll be working during most of the day. The sound of rustling metal utensils reached Duo's attentive ears. The pilot gestured for Harry to follow as he turned to investigate. Hiro set out 3 place settings, leaving the food to be ladled in the kitchen. Between the small table and different pots, serving away from the table made more sense. There was, however, a bowl of mixed salad greens in the center of the table. Harry followed his nose to what smelled like savory beef tips. A soup pot contained the meat in a thick broth, a smaller pot held mixed vegetables in a thinner broth, and a rice cooker sat open and ready. Wow, Hiro, this smells great, the nearly 13-year-old was clearly impressed. Here man doesn't do anything halfway. Duo laughed. Over dinner, Duo explained his plan of the evening. He also shared his plotting of a shopping spree for new clothes for Harry. The idea of lending Harry an outfit for the following day was tossed in there somewhere. Hiro merely nodded at each point, silently agreeing. Harry was amazed that Duo could talk so much while taking seconds and thirds and not talking with his mouth full. In what felt like only a few minutes, dinner was done and the three guys were stuffed. Eyeing the leftovers, Hiro messaged Hild. Shortly after, the former junker knocked on the door and squealed when Duo answered. Hild snatched her friend into a tight hug, and they excitedly jumped together. Hiro rolled his eyes while Harry looked on with a bemused expression. Happy chatter surrounded the long-haired boy and short-haired girl. Despite the rapid verbal exchange, they each conveyed their purpose in the building. Hild showcased her skill in multitasking as she conversed with Duo and put the leftovers in resealable packages. The compact young woman gave Hiro a hug in thanks for the food and surprise before Duo walked with her out of the apartment. Hiro glanced at his half-brother. Do you have summer homework? Yeah, it's still in my trunk, Harry replied. Let's take a look and get some of it out of the way. Hiro wouldn't quite admit it, but he was curious about magical textbooks. He hadn't had formal education until Operation Meteor landed him washed up on a beach. So, Chapter 5 moves the story along. Duo tries to add a feeling of normalcy to Hiro and Harry's interaction. Zex and Noin offer their assistance in getting the Potter boys caught up with wizard nobility education. And of course, Marge is left to question her brother's family and their treatment of Harry.